Hi guys, this is Rob from Little Man Cave on the Prairie. I'm Curtis from Just Jeep Things 1234. Today in my garage, actually, we're going to be changing out a couple of U-joints.
Yeah, we also did the rock lights and just a couple of things that needed to be addressed. So we're gonna hammer out a couple things today. Stay tuned.
So as you can see, this is your transfer case here, and this is the rear of the transmission. Common failures and things you'll notice with a U-joint failure is vibration. You may notice noise. You may notice lots of clunking, things like that. I'm not sure if you can see it here, but we're going to try to make this move. There is a bit of up and down play coming out of the transfer case, but you can see that there is quite a bit of movement right there. So this is the front of the drive shaft, and it's going into the differential here. And you have 4 bolts. It's basically holding this drive shaft to the yoke on the differential. You will need a 14mm wrench for the backside. And there's one. There's a lock washer there as well. Grab your bolts. Keep everything in a nice organized pile. When you do pull this last bolt out, make sure it doesn't hit you in the head. So on many vehicles, you will see that they have a slip in the actual drive shaft itself. And it's splined so that when the differential goes up and down, in this case it's not going to, because you have control arms and it's independent suspension in the front. If it was a solid axle, this whole differential would be going up and down. Therefore, the drive shaft needs to go in and out. So on this unit in particular, the slip here in the back is going to be the part that's going to be moving, but the differential doesn't move. So we have our bolts undone. You may have to tap the yoke just like that. And then just be mindful that when you do pull this drive shaft out, you may lose a little bit of oil. So be prepared for that, like that. And try not to wear it, like I did. And here we go, we got some oil spillage. So let's clean that up quick and try to catch that. So when we removed this drive shaft, we found the slinger. So this is a slinger, and it basically goes over the end of the shaft here, and it prevents gravel and debris from getting into the seal. And it just keeps everything out, and the dirt, stuff like that. But the tack welds had actually broken free, and this was spinning around, making all kinds of noise when it was driving. So we're gonna grind these welds off, both sides, and then just re-tack it on. So on top of your U-joint caps or your yokes and your drive shaft, there's 4 snap rings. I definitely advise wearing safety glasses when you do this. You're going to need a set of snap ring pliers to get these snap rings out. Sometimes they're not always snap rings. They're a different style. You may need to use a screwdriver and a hammer. Sometimes they could be kind of ignorant to get out of there, but you are dealing with a spring under tension, so you want to be safe and make sure this isn't going to fly out and hit you. So I got that one started here. We're just going to pry this one up here a little bit, just like that. And then we'll move on to the next one here. That one came out nicely. Take all 4 of them out. Honestly, it depends how you want to do this. You can do it 2 at a time, or you can do it all 4 of them. I just usually get them all out. Should be able to get a good view of this one. They could be a fight sometimes. I did pre-lubricate with these ones with some penetrant to help break the rust free. That one's out. I have soft jaws in this vise so we aren't marring the ends of the shaft here where the seals ride. This one's going to be a bit of a fight, I think. Be right back. Sometimes you got to get a flat screwdriver and do this two-handed. Get a screwdriver underneath there, and there you go. That's why you wear safety glasses. So removing of the U-joint, you could do this many different ways. You could use a vise, Sometimes people use like a socket to drive from one side to the other. I'm kind of old school, so I like to do this with a hammer. But there's things you need to know before you do this. You do not want to mar the outside of this this U-joint cup here, because you'll misshape it with a hammer and you can cause damage. And the other thing too is, while you're beating these out, you want to make sure you have this side of your yoke nice and tight. So I'll usually just give it a wrap somewhere around here and just kind of get it moving so it's popping out already. You can see, and then I got a 1-inch socket here. I'm going to slip this over top so that I'm not beating the two of these together. You can see it's coming out. And it does take a bit of force sometimes to get these out. Fortunately, these are pretty small U-joints. See the cup's coming out now. In fact, there you go. So as you can see, the inside of this cup, the needles have gotten dry. As your U-joint moves, these needles are supposed to rotate inside of this bore. And if they get water, moisture, dirt, etc. in there, or you have bad pinion angles or whatever, these will dry out and they'll crumble up and basically turn to dust. This cup doesn't look too bad, but it does definitely look a little rusty in there. So this U-joint is toast. So we flip the drive shaft 180 degrees around. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Hit it here. We're going to get this U-joint cup coming out, and then we should be able to get this U-joint right apart. There you go. As you can see, this one still has some grease in it, but it's definitely the other side in here that is having the issues, and that is where the dryness in these needles have disintegrated. So now that you have both U-joint cups out, you basically just lift this side up, pull this one out, and you will have needles and things falling out on the ground, which is extremely important to remember for later on when you go to reassemble this, because if you lose a needle or it falls into the base of the cup, you will squish it and your U-joint is no good. Now, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but when U-joints are $50 to $60 each, it adds up quick. So when you're taking this section of the U-joint out, it is a little bit more important you have this tight and you aren't hitting onto this section with your vise. You definitely want the edges of your U-joints to ride on the edge of the vise here. And then you're going to do the same thing, hit it here, and get this U-joint while supporting the back of this slip shaft. Go. U-joint cup should be out, and as you can see, there's a great example. There is no needles that fell out at all, and it is very rusty and very dry in there. And this side is very much the same. As you can see, there's no U-joint needles in there, or whatever was in there has now turned to dust, and that's where our major issue was to begin with. So I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side here. Stick this in the vise, and we know the U-joint is no good anyways, so you may have to fiddle around with it to get everything out of there. Once you kind of get everything seated in there again, do the same thing to this side. Once you have that banged out enough, you should be able to slip this U-joint out of here, and there you go. So as you can see, this section of the U-joint had grease, and this is the section where it had definitely worn out and the needles were no good. And if you look carefully, you can actually see little ripples in the end of the shaft here where the needles have basically gone dry and they've worn into the U-joint, and it's not allowing it to rotate sufficiently lubricated, and they piled up. So after you get the U-joint out, which fits in here like this, after you get that guy out, you want to have a good look at the insides of your bores, make sure everything's clean and there's no burrs. In this case, we do have a little bit of a burr here, so we are going to clean that up. And optimally, a flapper disc or something like this is most ideal. That's not going to fit in there, so I don't have anything small enough like that, so very carefully we're going to use a burr bit on the end of a drill, and we're going to clean that out just a little bit. Just enough to make sure the U-joint and everything slides in there nicely. We'll take a little bit out, check it, And then we will do what we have to remove just a little bit of a burr. And then we will check it again. A little bit more of a burr there. Just small bits at a time. If you're using a burr bit, it will remove material fast. So just a little bit at a time until you have a nice smooth bore. Just like that. So now that we got the slip yoke off the end of the drive shaft, we want to clean up these previous tack welds that have broken. So I'm just going to use a grinder, and we got to be very careful not to hit this shaft here, because this is where your seal is actually riding right here, and that's where it makes a seal. And a lip seal, when it rides on the shaft, will spread out. So you want to make sure that everything's clean here. And while you're doing this, you know, if you have a seal leaking already, replace it. And have a good look at your shaft. If your fingernail is grabbing the shaft, it's no good anymore. Sometimes you can get speedy sleeves. So a sleeve is a very, very thin shell that goes over top. Or most of the time, you honestly just replace this. So our next step here is going to be grinding down the spot weld. We're going to do that right now. Make sure you wear your safety glasses, PPE, etc. Honestly, a grinder is a little excessive. You probably don't use a grinder. You could definitely use, you know, a file or something else. But due to time constraints, we're just going to do this quick. So we're just going to clean it up as best we can. So when pressing a U-joint in, it's extremely important that you do not fold a U-joint needle over. And as you can see right here, there is a U-joint needle that's folded over. This is an old cup. This is the one I removed. When you go to install this, if one happens to fold over, do not press it together. If you do that, you will A, flatten the needle out, and B, you'll make an indentation on the inside of your cup. And you will wear that U-joint out within a matter of hours. So it's extremely important to make sure that when you're pressing your U-joint in, that all your needles are in place where they need to be, and that your U-joint goes in nice and smooth and seats fully. So the next step is to get this situated inside this drive shaft in the yoke here. But make sure you do one cup at a time, and be very careful not to get any dirt on this grease that's in there. This is a non-greasable U-joint. So some U-joints have grease nipples or zerks on the one side, and it's important to pay attention to where that grease nipple is, because if you put it in backwards, you have basically to take it apart and put it back together. So when you're putting these in, you want to make sure that you get your one side in and then lift it up. This is how I do it anyways. And you take your needle, your cup, slip it over top, make sure it starts and that your U-joint can slip up and down. That movement there is extremely important, and then we have movement there. So your next step is to take it over your press. You don't have to have a press, you can do this in a vise. I've done it on the side of the trail with a hammer and a socket. There's many different ways of doing this. And then you want to flip this guy up. I have a press, so we're going to use it here. And you basically want to get this squared away in there and just nicely. You may have to go at it a couple times. Press this guy in there. Of course, it's not going to go very nicely because I'm trying to do it on video. So we're just going to do it the old school way here and get it set on something solid. Just give it a smack. And that should seat in there. And as you can see, this side is now seated in there and flush. Your U-joint cup is where it needs to be. Everything's rotating, nothing's binding. That's extremely important. But when you go to press this side in, sometimes you will notice that it does get a little tight. When they're new, they're a little tight. It's okay. Just continue on. Just be sure that you do not flip a needle over and crush it in there, or the U-joint is no good. That's $50, $60 you have to throw away. So this next side, basically what I do is it's kind of a bit of a juggling match, especially on video here, is to pull this U-joint out as much as possible without pulling it entirely out of the U-joint cup on this side. And I will slip this one in there and try to find the happy spot. And what I mean by happy spot is balance, where you can move this U-joint back and forth in between the yoke ends, and we should be okay. So then the next step is to get this guy over here, hopefully, and make sure you're moving freely and slowly press this in a little bit. This is actually a little nicer to do in a vise. So there you go, I have movement up and down. I know that this U-joint is floating freely within those needles. Start working on pressing this guy in. But of course it's gonna fight me. So we may just do this in the vise, which we are definitely going to do. So the next step is take your vise, open it up, and we're gonna use the vise to press this in. I do definitely prefer to do it this way, because you can find a happy spot where your U-joint is sitting on both sides of the cup. And you can go just little small steps at a time. So now we have it set up here in the vise. The press we had, it's a great press, but it's not always ideal in most situations. You gotta be prepared on the fly sometimes. So I do actually prefer using the vise a lot for U-joints. And the reason for that is you can see the U-joint is moving nice and flush back and forth. There's no needles that have fallen. And then you very carefully want to stick this back in the vise and carefully press a little bit. Make sure you have movement. Do you still have movement? Yes. We'll stick it back in there. Oh, let that out. Give it a little bit more of a squish. Make sure we have some wiggle room. So now the ends of the shafts of the U-joint are happily in the cups. We just need to seat the cups the rest of the depth. Okay, so we still have movement in there. Everything's happy, nothing's binding up. We have even seating on each side. And that is the most important things to make sure of. Our cups are flush with the ends of the yoke. So now basically all we have to do is find the appropriate socket. Place it on a hard surface. I should have one actually handy from my Jeep. Get that centered on your cup. Get your fingers out of the way. Give it a smack. Now you can see that your U-joint cup has seated actually past the depth of where your snap ring sits. So what we'll do is we'll get the snap ring in there first, then we'll flip it over, gently tap this side in, just until this snap ring groove is exposed. So you'll take your snap ring, now that I've got this seated deep enough in there, you can actually see the groove on the inside. There's a groove. Make sure you have your safety glasses on. Seat your U-joint, your snap ring. Then we're going to move to the other side. Now we have to push this side down far enough where your U-joint cap mates up with the snap ring. So to do this, I usually just use a socket. Oops. Grab a socket and a hammer. Little taps. The other snap rings out of there. Little taps until I can just see the snap ring groove. And you will notice that this is going to tighten up a little bit. That is normal. You just want to make sure that your U-joint cap is flush with your snap ring, and then you want to get your new snap ring. Go grab your pliers. Get this side in. And then this side, sometimes you will need to lightly tap in with a hammer. And once you do, you will see that your snap ring is seated all the way around in this groove. And you are good to go. You're ready to move on to these ones into the end of the yoke. So now you have your joint installed on the drive shaft side. You have to get this part installed on the drive shaft, your yoke. And I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit of a juggling match, but this is unfortunately what it takes. You want to take your joint in your hand, your cup, and you want to keep as much dirt out from entering and getting onto the U-joint as possible. You want to move this slip yoke over as far as you can until you get the end of the U-joint exposed. Make sure you have all your needles lined up and nothing's fallen. Get this guy started here. Make sure it's seating onto the end of the U-joint. Then you're going to move over and you have to kind of hold it, open your vise so you just have enough room to get your vise in there. It's going to fight me a little bit. Start seating your joint cup. Stop. Make sure everything's moving freely. We didn't lose any U-joint needles. Continue to keep seating the U-joint. Try to get this in there as flush as possible. As you can see, this one's going nicely. And there you go. You have this one installed and flush. So then we're going to move on to the other side here. Again, this is a bit of a juggling match, and you have to be careful not to lose a needle. And then we're going to get this guy, just move this guy over enough just to get this U-joint cup started. When you get this U-joint cup started nicely, that is where your balance point is. And it is a bit of a balance to make sure that you have not dropped a needle. That is extremely important. You will destroy a U-joint fast. So we have that guy in there. We'll stop. Okay, so our U-joint is moving freely. Everything's happy. There's nothing binding up. And if it doesn't feel right, stop. Have a look at it. So there we go. Everything's going in nicely. Back the vise off. So we have our U-joint now pretty much installed. But again, we have to bury these to get our snap rings in there. So I'm going to move over to the vise. Make sure we have this nice and flush on the mating surface, or the impact surface. And we'll just give this a smack. Okay, another one. This is just a 18 millimeter 3/8 drive socket. Whatever fits inside of here, right on top of the cup nicely. Give it a smack. That one definitely went in. And then we're going to grab a new needle, or a new snap ring. Install this guy into the groove, just like that. So as you can see, I have installed this one a little bit deeper. So that's fine. This snap ring, or this U-joint cup, is going to have to come out anyways. So it's not a big deal. This one's going to have to seat a little deeper, but it also gives you an idea of how much it has to seat. So we'll move on to this side. And I'm going to pull this down with my arm because I'm a meatball. And then we'll just give this a smack on the side. Another one. Another one. Have a look. Another one. Okay, so I think we're there. So our U-joint is moving freely already. And you can see my previous weld repair where we welded this slinger back on. So pretty happy with that. We'll find another new snap ring. Get this guy situated on there. Get it in there. Should just snap in. So once you get that guy on there, make sure that your snap ring is seated inside the groove and that everything is happy there. And there you go. You've now replaced your U-joint. So for installation of this, you basically want to go in the reverse steps. I do recommend putting a little bit of grease, any kind of like wheel bearing grease or something like that on the shaft. Make sure you reinstall it correctly and everything's happy. And follow your torque specifications on your bolts. A little bit of blue Loctite is important sometimes. I do recommend that with these because this is going to have a lot of torque going through it, or 85 horsepower. And you know, just be diligent. Mark all your bolts, torque things to specs. Read your service manuals. Top up your transfer case fluids. If it's due for a change it. Those little things are going to go a long ways to saving your vehicle in the long run. So there you go. That's all that is needed to replace a U-joint in a drive shaft. To be honest with you, anything from, you know, Chevy Trackers to Kenworths and stuff like that, U-joints are all the same. They all get replaced the same or very similar. All the same procedures need to be followed with all of them. And if you'd like to see more detailed things like this, on my channel, Just Jeep Things 1, 2, 3, 4, I plan on going and doing a little bit more in-depth dives on maintenance, things like that. You know, just general things, brakes, shocks, you know, how to check alignment, stuff like that. I do try to do a little bit more fabrication and repair. I'm a mechanic myself. Little Man Cave on the Prairie, we're going to do a lot more videos together. We're going to try to utilize this space in here a lot more, and we're going to, you know, go for test drives, and, you know, we're going to definitely do some wheeling. I like to break stuff. He likes to bag the hell out of this. And yeah, stay tuned for a lot more.